All right, everyone, welcome. I know firsthand that the CMA journey can sometimes feel like you're drowning in spreadsheets, but I promise you, once the logic behind it all clicks, it really does start to make sense. Today, we're going to tackle one of the absolute cornerstones of the syllabus, the master budget, which you'll also see called the annual business plan. So let's get into it and map out how all the pieces fit together. I love this analogy. The best way to think about the master budget is to picture it as the grand central station of a company's financial plan. It's not just one big report, it's the central hub. It's where the plans from sales, production, marketing, all of them, they all have to arrive and depart on a coordinated schedule. If you get that coordination right, the whole company stays on track. So here's the most important thing to burn into your memory for the exam. The master budget is a network of smaller interconnected schedules. And the sequence is everything. Seriously, if you mess up the order, the whole thing just collapses like a house of cards. It all breaks down into two main branches. First, the operating budget, and second, the financial budget. Okay, so let's start with the operating budget. I always call this the doing part of the plan. This is all about the company's core day-to-day operations. It answers the fundamental questions: what are we actually going to make and sell, and what is it going to cost us to do that? Everything, and I'm not exaggerating, I mean everything, kicks off with one single number: the sales forecast. Think about it. Why? Well, because we have no idea how much to produce, or how much raw material to buy, or even how many people we need on the assembly line until we have a solid guess of how much we think we can sell. This number right here, it's the engine for the entire budget. So once we have that sales forecast locked in, we can move on to the production budget. And the logic here is actually pretty simple. We need to figure out how many units to make. So we start with our projected sales, and then we add whatever we want to have left over in inventory at the end of the period. From that total, we just subtract what we already have sitting in the warehouse. And boom, that's exactly how many units we need to produce. And from that one production budget, you can think of 3 children budgets being born. Once we know the number of units to make, it lets us calculate exactly how much to budget for, well, everything else. First, the direct materials we're going to need to buy. Second, the direct labor hours our team is going to work. And third, all that manufacturing overhead, the factory rent, the utilities, and so on. To finish off the operating budget, we just need to account for our selling and administrative, or S&A costs. These are all the non-factory costs, like the salaries for the marketing team. And the grand finale for this whole section is the pro forma income statement. It basically pulls all that operating data together to answer the million-dollar question: based on our plan, are we actually going to be profitable? But here's the thing. Profit isn't the same as cash. And as we all know, cash is king. This brings us to the second major pillar of our master plan, the financial budget. This part is all about the money, the actual tangible cash flowing into and out of the business. Now, this side of the budget has some pretty important parts, like the budget for big capital expenditures. But for the CMA exam, the absolute heart of the financial budget, the one you gotta know cold, is the cash budget. It tells a story in 4 parts. First, we project our cash receipts, all the money coming in. Then we project cash disbursements, all the money going out. That lets us figure out if we have a cash excess or a deficiency. And finally, that tells us what financing we might need to arrange. And this right here highlights the core challenge: timing. It's not about when you make a sale, it's about when your customers actually pay you, right? A huge sale you make in January on credit might not turn into actual cash until March. And on the flip side, cash disbursements track when you actually pay your bills. Getting this timing right is the absolute key to nailing the cash budget. So after you've projected all your cash coming in and all your cash going out, you're left with the most critical question for any business on the planet: will we have enough cash to keep the lights on? If you've got more coming in than going out, great, that's a cash excess. If not, you have a deficiency, and now you have to figure out your financing plan. How much do you need to borrow to get through the month? The whole entire master budget process finally culminates in creating the pro forma balance sheet and the statement of cash flows. These final reports give us that complete snapshot of the company's projected financial health at the end of the year. Now, look, the CMA exam isn't just going to ask you to crunch these numbers. It's going to ask you why. Why on earth do companies go through this incredibly detailed process? What's the strategic value here? So what's the big payoff? Well, there are 3 huge ones. The first is communication. A budget forces the sales team to actually talk to the production team. It stops sales from promising a massive order that production has no way of filling. Second, it's about resource allocation. It's a clear roadmap for how to spend money so one department doesn't blow their budget on a pet project and leave another high and dry. And third, it's about control. The budget becomes our yardstick, our benchmark, which sets us up perfectly to compare our actual results and do that super important variance analysis later on.
Okay, let's bring it all home. I want to give you a final checklist to really make sure this is locked in your mind for exam day. If you can just remember the flow we've walked through, you're going to be in fantastic shape.
If you only take away one single thing from our chat today, please let it be this. The entire budgeting process is kicked off by the sales forecast. It's the driver. But the ultimate measure of a company's survival is cash. It is the lifeblood of the organization. Now, here's a little pro tip for you, a really common trap that I see catch a lot of students. The capital expenditures budget, for buying big stuff like a new machine, that lives in the financial budget. But that new machine creates depreciation expense, right? And where does that show up? Back in the manufacturing overhead budget, which is part of the operating section. See? Everything is connected.
So there you have it, the complete map of the master budget. You know the sequence, you get the strategy, and you know the common traps to avoid. When you face this on the exam, just remember the map. So, what's the very first number you'll look for that drives the entire plan? You know the answer. You've got this.